Here's the paradox. Venezuela isn't poor, it's incredibly rich. Beneath its soil lies oil, gold, and minerals the modern world depends on, and history shows that when a country becomes this valuable, it attracts attention from everywhere. Attention brings pressure. Pressure reshapes economies, and over time that pressure can overwhelm even the richest nations. By the end of this video, you'll understand why Venezuela keeps trending, why its natural wealth plays a huge role in that story, and why this pattern has repeated itself across history, far beyond Venezuela. And before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe for more long-form stories that go beyond headlines and explain how the world really works. Chapter 1. The Problem with Being Too Rich, Resources Edition. Venezuela's story doesn't begin with collapse. It begins with abundance. Beneath its soil lies one of the largest concentrations of oil on Earth, not hypothetical oil, not future discoveries, proven reserves, enough to power modern economies for decades. But oil is only part of the picture. Venezuela also holds vast deposits of gold, iron ore, bauxite, and other strategic minerals, the kinds of resources modern civilization quietly depends on every single day. And this is where the paradox begins. Because in today's world, resources aren't just wealth, they're attention magnets. When a country controls something the global system needs, it becomes impossible to ignore. Markets revolve around it. Supply chains depend on it. Long-term plans are built on access to it. At first, this feels like an advantage. Money flows in, confidence grows, expansion accelerates. But history shows us something counterintuitive. The more valuable a country becomes, the more fragile its balance can be. And that fragility doesn't come from scarcity. It comes from dependence. Chapter 2. The Resource Attention Trap. This is where we introduce a key idea. The resource attention trap. When a country possesses something the world desperately needs, attention follows. That attention can come in many forms: economic interest, strategic focus, market pressure, global dependency. The problem is that attention is rarely neutral. High-value resources tend to distort decision-making. Short-term gains often feel more urgent than long-term resilience. Why invest heavily elsewhere when one sector seems to provide everything? Over time, the economy narrows. The nation becomes more sensitive to global price swings. A drop in commodity prices doesn't just hurt profits, it shakes the entire system. And when trust in systems begins to weaken, the effects ripple outward into daily life, savings, employment, and social stability. This trap is not unique to Venezuela. It's a pattern seen again and again throughout history. Chapter 3. When money stops telling the truth. One of the least discussed effects of extreme resource dependence is how it quietly distorts signals inside an economy. In a healthy system, prices, wages, and markets act like feedback loops. They tell people what's scarce, what's valuable, and where effort should go next. But when a single resource dominates everything, those signals begin to blur. Money starts flowing for reasons that have less to do with productivity and more to do with access. Some sectors grow not because they're efficient, but because they're connected to the resource stream. Other sectors shrink, even if they're essential, simply because they're harder to fund. Over time, this creates a strange disconnect. On paper, the country still looks rich. Beneath the surface, everyday systems struggle to keep up. What the economy appears to say no longer matches what people experience. And when money stops telling the truth, decision-making becomes harder at every level. From national planning to household survival. This is where vulnerability quietly sets in. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually, as reality drifts further away from the numbers meant to describe it. Chapter 4. Gold, oil, and the illusion of endless wealth. Resource wealth creates a powerful illusion: permanence. Oil feels endless. Gold feels eternal. Minerals feel like guarantees. But global markets don't operate on guarantees, they operate on cycles. Boom periods encourage expansion, budgets grow, commitments increase, expectations rise, then conditions shift, prices fluctuate, demand changes, costs increase. If an economy is too dependent on one pillar, even small shocks can feel catastrophic. The hardest part is that these shifts don't happen overnight. They happen slowly, quietly, until suddenly they're impossible to ignore. By the time people start asking questions, the system is already under strain. Chapter 5. Why powerful interests always circle resource giants. This part is often misunderstood, so it's important to be precise. Countries, corporations, and institutions naturally gravitate toward regions that hold critical resources, not because of ideology, not because of politics, but because modern civilization depends on them. Energy security, supply stability, long-term access. When a country becomes central to those needs, it finds itself surrounded by influence, economic, strategic, and structural. This influence reshapes incentives. It affects how markets behave. It affects how risks are distributed, and over time it can limit flexibility, making adaptation harder, not easier. Again, this is not unique. It's structural. Chapter 6. A pattern repeated around the world. Across history, we see similar stories. Oil-rich states, diamond-heavy regions, gold-dependent economies. Some managed the balance carefully, others struggled. The common thread isn't geography or culture, it's over-concentration. When a single sector becomes too dominant, it shapes everything around it. And when that sector wobbles, everything else follows. Venezuela stands out not because it's different, but because its story is unusually visible. Chapter 7. Why this isn't just Venezuela's story. Venezuela trends because it sits at the intersection of resource wealth, global dependency, and fragile systems. But the lesson here is bigger. In a world increasingly dependent on finite resources, more countries will face similar pressures. More economies will feel the strain of over-reliance. More societies will discover that being valuable can be as dangerous as being poor. Venezuela isn't a warning about ideology. It's a warning about imbalance. Chapter 8. Why Venezuela keeps trending. Now that you understand the system, the question makes more sense. Why does Venezuela keep trending? Because the internet doesn't just follow news, it follows symbols. Venezuela has become a visual shorthand online, a country reduced to clips, headlines, and fragments, often shared without context, history, or explanation. Short videos travel faster than understanding. A single image can spark outrage, curiosity, or shock, and algorithms amplify whatever provokes the strongest reaction. But there's another reason Venezuela trends more than most. It sits at the intersection of extreme wealth and visible strain, a country rich in oil and gold, yet constantly referenced as a warning. That contrast is irresistible to the internet. People don't share Venezuela because they fully understand it. They share it because it feels like a contradiction that demands an explanation. And until that contradiction is understood, not politically but structurally, Venezuela will continue to resurface in global conversations over and over again. Not because it's unique, but because it's one of the clearest examples of what happens when value becomes pressure. Conclusion. Venezuela trends because it forces an uncomfortable realization that being rich in resources doesn't guarantee stability. And in a world increasingly dependent on finite materials, this won't be the last country to face that paradox. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. See you in the next one.